Welcome to the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Today, I am so excited to be sitting down with Payal Beri, who is the founder of RK Empathy and a speaker. Payal's journey began as a third culture kid navigating the world while trying to make sense of her identity. Her story spans from a childhood spent in the Middle East, Africa, Australia, and finally the US, with empathy playing a pivotal role in her life's journey. Amidst cultural disparities, she experienced firsthand the full spectrum of humanity, from bullying and racism to moments of compassion. This unique lens led her curiosity to recognize the complexities of the world at an early age. It was through these universal threads of humanity that she naturally gravitated to immersing her career as a former clinical therapist and organizational psychologist. Today, Payal stands as a beacon for changemakers, empowering leaders to reclaim their inner identity, to have the audacity to think big, and confidence to transform change. As a social impact founder of RK Empathy and empathy researcher, she recognizes the emotional and mental resilience it takes to journey this path. Blending her personal and professional experience, she is now on a mission to empower a world where empathy and accountability triumph the walls of division. Through her framework, Reframe Perspective, she teaches her 3 core elements that inspire people to elevate their emotional resilience and take conscious action to make an impact bigger than themselves. Payal has inspired leaders at NASA, Google, and MITRE. She's partnered and worked extensively with social impact organizations such as IC Stars. When Payal speaks and connects with your audience, she invites them into an experience, motivating and creating inner transformation for inspired action to take place. Today, Payal and I talked about so many things, from compassion to self-compassion to her story in much more detail and how she came to be where she is today. We talked about the recent pivots she's made in her business, how listening to her intuition really led her to the moment that we find her in now. We talked about making an impact, our inner narratives, business advice, when to follow it, when to maybe not follow it, how we show up for our clients as coaches, how accountability can work in a coaching relationship, and so much more. I just know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Payal as much as we did. Without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Payal. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me. I love all of our conversations that we have offline, so I'm so excited to have this one online.
Oh my goodness, me too. I'm really, really looking forward to digging in with you today. I guess maybe to get us started, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself to our listeners?
Oh, sure. That's always such a loaded question because I feel like we're always so ever evolving. But I am Payal Beri and I am the founder of RK Empathy. And my work is very much deeply in, doing inner identity work and doing social impact work and really finding the balance of just finding compassion in empathy and accountability in the world that we live in. I was a former clinical therapist for a long time. And so working very much in the field, which is what inspired a lot of this. And my other world work of doing organizational psychology and being in leadership. And so blending the two together has what's led me to the world I'm in today.
Well, I'm so excited to talk all about the world you're in today and how you got here and empathy and compassion and leadership and authenticity, and topics that I know are so, and impact, of course, topics that are so close to both of our hearts.
Yeah.
Maybe before we jump into all of the details, I know our listeners really love hearing how people came to be in the moment where we find them. And so really would love to invite you to share the story of how you came to be where you are today. And it really an invitation too to take up space and give us the whatever length version feels most true and appropriate to you right now.
Oh God, where do we begin, right? It's one of those questions. Honestly, I think that a lot of times when this question gets asked, like we focus on our career and we focus on, oh, I did this work and I did this work. But honestly, for me, I think that it was just something that was ingrained in my life purpose. And the reason for that is, I'm a third culture kid. And that means that even though I'm Indian, I didn't grow up in India. I actually grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Egypt, in Dubai, in Iraq. And then we moved to the US, when I was around 10. But even within that, my welcome to America was second grade and was Queens, New York, and then Florida, and then Edison, Jersey. And then I did third grade in Australia. And then we moved to the US like in fourth grade. So at a very young age, I already had such exposure to so many cultures, so many people. And in a span of 2 years, I moved like 9 times. And so because of that, I had to be really agile. I had to really learn how to connect with other kids and how do I, get invited to play, or how I was being treated because of whatever cultural bias that they had about me coming from a different country. And so all of that, I feel like from a very early age, I became an observer of the world. And I became an observer of just how people connect and what is like the foundations of the way that, regardless if you're living in India or you're living in Egypt or living in Australia or a kid in Queens, New York, what is it that fundamentally is going to connect me with them? And so that's where really that the story of empathy really began, and my obsession and love for psychology and human behavior. And then, I was actually a film major when I first got started, and I was a performer, dancer, choreographer, and I loved that world of creativity. And that always was there for me. But I think at some point it just became like, well, I need to get a job that's going to bring me be able to survive and live and all those things. But I really leaned into becoming a clinical therapist. And I think it was those early experiences that really put me in that place of, again, it's more about just connecting with humans, connecting with people and the identity of who they are. And as I was doing that work, it took me into spaces that was very unforeign to me as well. Like I grew up in California, and having to go into areas that I'd never been exposed to actually humbled me as well to understanding just the difference of narratives that exist. And, working with patients that had severe psychosis, like that also gives you a lot of humility and just appreciation for your life. No one chooses to have hardship in their life. That's not a choice that people are like, I want this to make my life harder. And so recognizing that platform that I was able to have and going into it with a lot of groundedness, I transitioned into leadership development and organizational psychology because one thing I realized when I was doing work in nonprofits and doing the work as a clinical therapist was like, I want to make even bigger impact. And that led me to training and development and like, how can I support individuals that are actually doing the work and support them in their, in their own understanding of themselves. That took me into corporate, but I was very quick to realize that you can't take a clinical therapist and a creative and put them into a corporate environment. It's like wearing a wool sweater on a naked body. Like it just feels really, really uncomfortable. But that ultimately in 2019 is when I left corporate and I decided to really take, all the different parts of me and bring it together. And that's where now, we have IKEA Empathy that's focused on a world that's empowered with empathy and accountability to triumph the walls of division. And we do this through creating experiences that really leans on my creativity as a choreographer. And everything that I see in this world, regardless of what it is like a choreography like it's a stage, and it's how do I take people through the story of this? How do I evoke emotion? How do I help people connect? And so I do this through like a choreographer's lens, but it's done through the lens of also of humanity. And so the way that, we've now gotten to where we are today is that, I work with social impact founders and change makers to help them reclaim their own inner identity so that they can go propel deeper impact. And we do that through, our experiences, but separately building RK Impact, which is honestly the biggest joy of my life. And that is the social impact arm of RK Empathy. And that's where, it's think escape room meets cultural IKEA, like taking people through immersive experiences. Because one thing that I just really realized is that it's by no fault of anyone's that if there is a lived experience that you have, but you have never needed to be exposed to another type of life and experience, it is like an abstract, like calculus, conversation. Like I don't do math well. And if you're going to talk to me about calculus, it's not like, I'm not going to understand what you're talking about. So by able to helping people actually immerse them into experiences to build that empathy, to build that compassion so that we can have conversations that are focused on finding the humanity in everything. And so that's where ultimately what's led me to where I am today is my life, my personal experience of the world, and then just the things that I would say over the last 18 years that I've just experienced as being a clinical therapist, being in leadership, working with social impact leaders, founders, all of that. That's what's brought me here to today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for telling us your story. I feel like there are so many threads that I am so excited to pull with you. One thing that I would actually love to talk about maybe first, because I know it's relatively recent for you. I know that, we have plenty of founders and entrepreneur curious listeners. And I know that your business has shifted pretty recently.
Yeah.
And as we know, our businesses are continuously evolving, but would love to hear a little bit more about how your work and your business have shifted really recently as of this conversation, and what informed that, what inspired that, and what's lighting you up about what comes next.
Such a powerful question. I feel it in my sacral. So, this is something where I would say that I don't come from a business family. My family are 9-to-5ers, and taking that step and being, leaning into that in 2019 and being someone who's always very wants to learn and hoards learning and is always, curious. I've leaned on to working with people where I knew intuitively what my strengths are and what I get excited by. But because of my own imposter syndrome and because of my own, struggle with trusting myself, I leaned into what is everybody else doing? What is everyone else telling me that I should do? And that led me into building a business that, yes, I could do it. Yes, I had experience making it happen, but I hated every second of it. And it was literally affecting my health. Last year, I was working on a really big Fortune 50 organization contract, and it would have just skyrocketed the business. And, there was a lot of effort being put into that. And it was, all around leadership development and emotional intelligence, empathy, all the things. But my eye was twitching for 4 months. Every single day, I thought my nerves were going to pop or something. My personality kind of shifted. I was not nice to be around all the time. So I felt bad for my family, but it was taking a lot. But this pressure of, because I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to build RK Impact and build this pop-up experience and grow that part. And that's going to take a lot of funding. And the advice that I kept getting over and over again was self-fund, do it yourself. So if this contract is going to bring you in the money, then do that and then go do that, what you want. And all I could think about was that it takes the same amount of effort to build this thing that I hate as much as it would to build a thing that I love. And I didn't go into business so I could be in something I hate. I might as well just stayed in a job that I didn't like. And so while this contract thing was working, and this is honestly a pivotal part of it, is because when I walked away from this, I walked away from $500,000 in September. And literally contracts were ready, like, I was going to sign everything, but something felt uncomfortable for me. Something felt wrong about this. And I'm so glad I walked away because this organization was not ready. There's a lot of toxicity in there, and it would have actually just completely debilitated my health. And my only reason for doing it was because I just wanted the money. I wanted the money to go build this thing that I really want. And that is really, I remember this still. It was September 28th that I decided to walk away. And I said, I'm done. I'm not doing any of this. I'm not doing anything that I hate. I want to do things that I can do and I love. And I think that when I started to put that in there, literally 3 days later, I was in Chicago. So, I'm in LA right now, and I was in Chicago, and I met my mentor, and I told my mentor, I decided to shut this thing down, and I walked away from $500,000 because A, it would have been out of integrity for anyone who was part of it. And second, it would have been another year of me just feeling really depressed. And so it wasn't worth it. And I now am all in. I don't care how it's going to happen. If I self-fund, if I have to get investors involved, what I'm going to do. But I'm going to follow on the path that feels intuitively right for me, where my strengths are, my passions are, and where I can trust myself. And literally me telling her that, and she said, Payal, you want to do this? I'm going to back it up for you, and I'll open every door. And she has. And so that was just that, again, that awakening of like, I was so fixated on this one thing that was miserable that I'm not looking at all these other ways that abundance can come my way. And so after that moment, I never looked back. And I knew obviously that was going to do a little bit of a financial hit on me. But, I still took that chance of like, I want to go do the thing I want to build. And I want to be around individuals that believe in this work. And so surrounding myself with other social impact founders, surrounding myself with change makers who want to make this world a better place. And so started doing that work with them. And essentially all of my clients that I had from the previous work I was doing, phased it out literally just this Memorial weekend. And, right after that, the email that was associated with that, I shut it down. I turned all the Google folders off, like archived it. It's like it never existed. But I've taken so many learnings from there that I've been able to bring into the work that I'm doing today. And the crux of it all and the root of it all is just like trusting myself, relaxing my nervous system, leaning into more compassion for myself and believing that I know what I'm doing and I don't need to get constant validation from external individuals in these, I should do it this way. Because now that what I'm doing currently, I'm coaching clients, I'm working in doing deep internal work with them so they can like feel more confident in their own identity and be able to create a business or a impact that they feel connected to versus what I like. And that's one thing that I'm really clear about is like, I'm never going to tell you what you should do. I'm going to help you build a confidence so you believe what you need to do. And that role is the most rewarding experience that, I would say is the biggest takeaway from what I just shut down and where I'm headed now with RK Impact and as well as with the coaching and the speaking and the retreats that I get to do with Social Impact to help them also build the confidence and have the audacity to think big for themselves. Like you can do it. You have it in you. So that's just been so refreshing.
I love that so much. I'm so celebrating you for listening to your intuition. It's so wild. It's interesting. I feel like a big theme that I've been thinking a lot about lately is it's so interesting how easy it is to get attached to how we think the abundance is going to come in. And I found for myself, as soon as I open myself up to it showing up in countless ways, it does.
Yeah. It's the spaciousness.
Yeah. But when we're like holding on so tight and listening to all the shoulds,
Yeah.
we're only seeing one path.
Yeah.
We're making it so hard for it to find us.
Yeah. I think it's just that feeling of like, especially when something is new to you, it's so easy to get caught up in that. And it's so easy to get caught up in, well, I don't know how I should lean on others, which is true. Like there's mentorship. Like obviously, you want to have people that you lean into for that. But I think that one thing that we do is, and I see this over and over again, is that I have years of experience in psychology. I have years of experience in doing social impact work. But what was different was I didn't have years of experience as an entrepreneur. And so, but somehow that ended up overtaking all this other value that I have. And I know you've also had similar stuff as well. And so it's like, that's the other teaching is just like helping people realize like, okay, entrepreneurship may be new to you, but your skills and your value and what you're giving to the world isn't. So when you're thinking about that entrepreneur, it's like there's no playbook. If you don't fall into the whole thing that there's a playbook, MLM type schemes, like all of that kind of stuff, like do not fall into that. Like listen to what is your strength. Like I know, for example, I love speaking. I'm a speaker. So actually I focus more on being a speaker versus I take only like 3 or 4 coaching clients because I don't want to have a roster full of coaching clients, but I want to be able to, I'm better at in-person experiences. And so I created a business that allows for in-person experiences, that highlights the creativity, that highlights the deep work I can do in those short moments. But I think that we misalign a lot of things sometimes.
Totally. Well, I mean, yeah, I have had such a similar experience in the like, I think it can just be, I mean, I've now been an entrepreneur for 4.5 years. So it's not even like I just started my business, but I feel like I continuously am reminding myself that like, there are so many people out there who will sell you the playbook or the process or the whatever. And when you have like a decade, 15 plus years of experience doing a type of work, but you realize that you need to know how to run a business in order to deliver the work that's on your heart that you're meant to do. It's so human and it's so easy. I know for me, I have had so many moments of like thinking someone else knew better than me.
Yeah.
And that practice of slowing down and listening to ourselves and what's on our hearts and paying attention to our bodies when your eye is twitching and it's like, don't take the contract. It requires a lot of space and it requires a lot of self-trust.
Yeah. I remember telling the coach that I had at the time, who was really pressing for this and was saying, you should do it. Like, oh my God, like you're going to be able to have, such success and blah, blah, blah with whatever you want to do. And I was just like, you've built a business that you love. Why are you encouraging me to build a business that I hate? Just for the cash amount, just so that it can be like, my client made X amount in her business with our work together, right? So it's that piece of that you're talking about, like that self-trust. And it takes time, right? It takes time. Like I think that no matter what part of our journey that we're on, whether we're just getting started, in the middle of it, pivoting, changing with the trends of like whatever's happening in the economy and all of that, it takes time. But I'm going to ask you a question. I'm curious, like, how do you kind of like stroke the fine line between self-trust and yourself and taking in input and feedback from others?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I love when people ask me questions on my podcast. It's funny because I feel like to just like zoom out a little bit in terms of like advisors and mentorship and support I've gotten in my business, I really feel like I learned a lot from some amazing leaders and coaches and strategists in my first couple years of business. And then I feel like I got the idea that I like needed to go out and learn from other new people, went in search of new perspectives, and really ended up taking some advice that I would not wish upon anyone because I wasn't listening to myself. And I have recently like come back in many ways to like some of the original people that I learned from, things I learned from them, and realized that it was all always working. It was a manufactured need that I created for myself. I mean, of course, I think having multiple perspectives, especially diverse perspectives, is so important. But I was like, oh, yeah, the foundations and the fundamentals work. And we think as we grow, we need to get, I thought as I grew, I needed to get like cuter or fancier. Like, and the reality is the fundamentals and the foundations, like there's core things that are true. So similar to you, it's funny because I was just noticing this, and we recently had an open enrollment period for the Girls Club Collective community. And I feel like I was receiving two very different types of advice on how I show up for that. And one school of advice, shall we say, was around the was basically this idea of like, my job is to communicate what we do and make it easy for people to understand our vision and what we're building, and show up and extend the invitation and let the people who are ready to come in come to me. And the other school of advice was like, follow up with every single person who's like expressed interest in this and make sure you answer their questions and close the loops. And I feel like I did as much of that as I could energetically handle. And I also had a moment where I was like, this is just not how I want to do this. Like, it's just not. And I feel like in the end, like the approach that I took, somewhere in the middle, right? In terms of not getting in my own way by not following up on conversations that felt really aligned and energetic, and also not embodying this like hunting energy. It sort of felt like to me that is just not how I want to do things at all.
Yeah, I feel that so deeply. And thank you so much for sharing that so openly. I think that there's so much of that that I resonate with as well as the 2, 3, 4 different types of advice. But I think actually something that you mentioned before that also is just so key of you worked with certain people and then you're like, okay, now I want to go out and learn more. And that's something I've done a lot of is like, I'm going to work with this coach and that coach and this coach. And I have literally worked with so many. And I'm like, okay, now I need to like stop like just going there. And I think that it's also something to recognize. And this is something I've done is recognize that, am I hiring another coach because there's truly something that I haven't learned that I need to apply to what I'm trying to build? Or am I just now hiring another coach because it's become my security blanket because it's hard for me to think of executing off on my own? And when it's the latter, which is something I had operated in for a while, is recognizing how much of that is like actually like your nervous system is just not feeling safe on your own. And the mapping you have to do around that to like allow yourself to move through the motion of trusting yourself. The only way that you can actually like help your nervous system heal and help your nervous system experience it is by experiencing. And so that means like not taking on, you know, if your natural course is to be like, okay, I'm going to take on another coach and I'm going to learn this perspective now. Give yourself that space and time to just even apply what you just learned, you know, give yourself that space and time to actually experience that. And I love what you talked about with the hunter. And here's the part, you know, it's like realizing like different things work for different people. So even when they go out there and they're like, I did this and it worked for me, and I did this and it's worked for hundreds of my clients and all of those things, that's fantastic. Like that is genuinely really fantastic. But it's important to then not just have that knee-jerk reaction, be like, oh my God, then that means that's what I need, you know? And that is that self-trust, that's that self-internal guide that you have to listen to and be like, wait a second, that means I'm just like squirreling energy. And, you know, what do I do? Like, I'm like squirrel here, squirrel there. And it's just really being able to trust that, like, no, wait a second, let me just pause and be like, what is the energy I like to, like, I like to receive. I want to welcome in who's ready. I don't want to have to climb Mount Everest to get someone to believe in this. You know, I don't even like hiking. I barely like walk, like, you know, go for my walks and stuff, but it's a really powerful experience. But I think the only way through it is to go through it.
Totally. And I so love your reflection on like both self-trust and really that inner check with ourselves around what is my goal in choosing to work with or learn from this person. And I do think that it's so interesting because one of the coaches I've worked with, I know when we first started working together, she was going through a phase where she's like, I am not being coached because I am in my nervous system learning to trust myself. And at the time I was like a brand new coach and I was like, I can't even like imagine that, but I'm going to believe it. And I feel like, I've gone through my own versions of that. And I think being really clear when we invite people into our hearts and our souls and our businesses on one, what we hope to get out of that experience. And two, I know for me, just like I'm increasingly so excited when I get to work with people who want to help me build my own self-trust as opposed to prescribe is such a different experience. And I feel so lucky that we're like living in a moment in a space where we get to offer that for our clients and for the people who we get to work with, and where there are so many space holders out there who are holding space in a similar way.
Yeah, I think something that I do with my clients whenever they sign on or before they even sign on, I ask is like, how do you like to learn? How do you like to receive information? How do you like to be held accountable? I ask them, versus telling them, this is how I'm going to do it. This is what, is going to happen. And it creates that safe space for them to feel like, what is it that I need in these moments? Because my role and our role as a coach or as someone who's just, holding space is to do exactly that. We're holding space for this person. And I think with the type of clients you work with and type of clients I work with, they're holding space for so many. And so I always say, like, let us hold space for you as you're holding space for others. And this is your chance to decompress and just be able to say, like, no, like, this is what I want. And it's like, okay, well, then that's how we'll go about this, And so if I have clients that are like, I love to be held accountable through, our Voxer like sessions. Like I want you to like, once a week, check in on this or whatever. I'm like, great, that's what we'll do. Like you set the terms. I'm just here to like hold that space for you and then challenge it a little bit to being like, is this something that you're doing that's comfortable because it's, your status quo? Or is this like, how is this actually helping you with, as you said, like, what's that North Star? What's that goal that you have? And are we moving in that direction or are we just holding space because the fear is too much right now to move that? And that's also okay too, because it's important to recognize that like each part, and like you said, right, like 4.5 years of being in business and similar, is that every moment of this requires like a different way of holding space. Sometimes you're in it, sometimes you just freeze, sometimes you're questioning things, and you need a different type of space for that. And that's what we're here for.
Totally. I love that so much and really love how you described how you empower people to set the terms for what accountability and support helps them do the work that they do. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I wanted to jump in here and let you know that we are hosting our next free Girls Club Collective Community Power Hour on Friday, August 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you are craving connection with like-hearted leaders and founders in sustainability, social impact, or ESG, this is the room that you want to be in. You'll be connected to other fantastic change agents. Don't worry, we'll provide conversation starters too. And you'll have a chance to ask questions about our upcoming cohort of the Girls Club Collective. We love growing this beautiful community so much, and we can't wait to connect you to our constellation of women changing the world. You can sign up on our website at girlsclubcollective.co/community-power-hour, or via the link in the show notes. I am so excited to meet you virtually in person on Friday, August 9th. Now, back to the episode. I feel like we would be so remiss not to talk a little bit more about the experiences that you're creating, because I know I've been so impressed and inspired by the way that you're approaching compassion building, for lack of a better phrase, in the work that you're doing right now. And so I know you talked a little bit about it, but would love to talk in more detail about how you're thinking about creating experiences that can really give people who haven't maybe had an opportunity to experience a different perspective of life and the world and hardship and opportunity to have a different appreciation of what other people are going through.
Yeah, this is just such an exciting time. I get to right now be in my creative energy and something that I haven't touched in a while. So it's really nice. And the experience that we're creating. So there's two, like, and I'll talk about RK Impact because that's again the thing that I'm just so excited about. And we're launching the pilot of it in next year in Chicago. And so the concept of this is escape room meets cultural IKEA. And so the only way through it is through the whole thing. And we're taking a specific, social or racial injustice topic, and we're bringing it to life by putting it into an experience where, you and your friends and individuals like come through. And not only are you, a lot of immersive experiences that are out there are very based on like, here's a video you watch, or you're in a dome and you suddenly see like a 3D piece of it. This is actually like you experiencing it as if it's you in that position. And there's three phases to this, which is one, you experience what it's like to be set up to fail in the system. The second is what it's like to feel like when you're in it, in the system itself, and you can't get out. And then the third is what happens when you actually are getting out of it. And now you have to find your way back into the world and reintegrate yourself, and all the gaps and hoops that you have to jump through and obstacles that are set up that ultimately make just forfeiting and living in a certain way easier than actually trying to get out of it. So for example, our first, topic that we're covering is around prison reform. And so the idea is that when someone goes through this experience, it's going to be that you go through it, you first experience what it's like to be set up, like, how people treat you, how you're talked to, gaps that you have in your education, gaps that you have in your community support, isolation, all of those things. And then from there, you actually go into what is going to be a room that looks very much and feels very much like a prison. And you're going to hear screams, and you're going to smell like the moistness of things. And you're going to maybe, like you're really going to be put in that situation where like, wow, this is like a very tiny space. This is like, I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling, what's coming up for you. And then it's like, okay, here you go. You're ready to go out in the world. Here's $20 and a bologna sandwich. And that's still done till today. $20 and a bologna sandwich in a brown bag. And now you have to experience what it's like to be like, yeah, we have all these things set up for you to be successful in the world. But it's like, oh, wait a second. You don't have your ID, so you can't get the house. You can't get that job application. Oh, now you're a felon, so you can't get this, so you can't get that. And it's like all these things that have been put in place to make someone be like, F it. Like, I'm just like, why bother? And so it literally is putting someone completely in that experience. So then that you're able to literally understand what it's like. And we're creating a space where it's not going to be from a place of like shame, and it's not a place of like we're shaming anyone or anything. It's about feel all the feelings. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling upset? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling what's coming up for you? Because those I can guarantee are the same feelings that this individual has experienced. And then once you get out of that, we actually will be collaborating with the organizations, nonprofits, with someone who's formerly incarcerated who's going to come out and share their story with you, and how now that you've gone through this experience, how can we actually now have a conversation about humanity and the solutions around this, or just shifting our perspective, reducing stigmas, And so similar to this experience that we're going to launch first in Chicago and then take it around the US. We're going to also bring on other topics like food inequity or homelessness and mental health, or veterans and mental health, and other topics that, to again, just connect you to what is it that this demographic and population goes through, to then be able to have that conversation. Because, I do believe there's like too many of us that have too many opinions about too many things without ever having experienced it, yet we have the power of making decisions over their lives.
Absolutely. It's so inspiring how you're thinking about this, and it makes so much sense. I love the way that you describe the escape room meets cultural IKEA. When you put it that way, it's like, oh yeah, I can totally see how that's a thing. And it's like, why aren't there more experiences like this?
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many people making so many decisions that impact so many people's lives who have no lived experience that they're
Yeah.
making those decisions based on.
No lived experience, or even like never even spoken to someone who's gone through it, and all you're hearing about things is just what the media portrays or just what you're reading in newspapers. And sadly, in today's world, so much of that is already bought out by a specific perspective that they want to sell, and so I always say that, if there's a topic or if there's something that you are uncomfortable with or you don't know enough about, instead of forming an opinion, find someone who's actually lived it and just ask them, just talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get questions, people ask me about what my thoughts are on, different topics. And I'm like, honestly, I don't know enough about it to form an opinion. So I'd rather learn about it first before I'm going to just like say what I think based off of a very loose understanding of something.
Totally. Well, I think it's so exciting, and I can't wait to see where it goes, because it feels like there's so much that you can do with this concept.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm excited to be able to partner with universities, partner with organizations, partner with, so many different entities that can help. Again, my goal and purpose for this is just to shift the conversation, reduce stigmas and stereotypes, bring back the humanity and compassion, and for us to be able to just like shift the way that we're thinking about things, less from a divisive place and more from a humanitarian place. I read this quote somewhere, and I've heard many people say it, and it's like, yes, absolutely. Is that what's happened is that we've taken actual moral things like homelessness or things that are happening in the world, and instead of fighting about or arguing about policies that should be in place to solve it, we are now questioning if that's even something we need to solve for. And I find that so fascinating that, the conversation never used to be like, how do we fix homelessness? What is homelessness? We need to hide it away. It always used to be the conversation like, how do we solve for this issue? And that's exactly the focus of this. Is like, we're not looking at it as like, is this bad or good? It exists. So regardless if it's bad or good, it exists and we've got to deal with it. How are we dealing with it? And how do we deal with it with some compassion?
Absolutely. I mean, I know compassion and empathy are so core to so much of the work that you do. And I also feel like I can't not ask you, while we're here on the topic of compassion, I know self-compassion is also something that's really important to you. And it's something certainly we have a lot of conversations about in my world. I'm curious, when you think about self-compassion, so much of like having compassion for other people often starts with also having compassion for ourselves. Although I know
100%.
for so many of us, maybe it comes easier to have it for other people than to have it for ourselves. But what does the self-compassion practice look like for you? Or what tips or resources would you offer for anyone who's listening who is on a self-compassion journey and really wanting to deepen into self-compassion?
Oh, I feel like you could spend so much time on this part. I always say that in order to have genuine empathy, and empathy is an ever evolving experience, but to have that empathy, we have to start with self-compassion. And self-compassion is so much more than just, I went to a yoga class, I meditated. I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. It's also just about understanding your relationship with how you view the world and how you can sit with the comfort and uncomfort of it. And that means that how you're able to like just understand your own, what little pieces have kind of created the lens that you see this world through, right? So the neighborhood you grew up in, things you heard in your family, the media, the movies, all of those things. How has that created a perception of your own identity and your existence in this world? And when you can do that identity work and understand that piece, even something, for example, as recognizing just the healing that has to happen through those stories and things that you have taken on that others may have said so much about you that you're like, well, I guess that's who I am because this is what everyone else sees, versus like, well, is that who I am, or is that what I believe? For example, me as a South Asian Indian girl, I like to speak and I'm a talker and all these things. And so I grew up with, you talk too much, you're too opinionated, you're too many thoughts about these things, whatever. And I mean, that's paid off well for me in my career, but it's a constant mindset thing that I have to work on even till today, is that, gosh, like, am I being challenging? Am I being difficult? Am I being this? Am I being this? Because I've been told that so much that to be able to say like, no, I'm allowed to have this. Like, I'm allowed, like, this is a strength of mine. Like, I'm not going to suppress that. It takes work. It takes that like understanding of it. And then through doing that piece of that self-compassion of like valuing yourself, right? Instead of saying the things of, well, once I get that, then I can say, look at me now, or look at what I've done and I value myself, and flip it to saying like, I add this much value because I have done, 18 years of this or 10 years of this, or like, because I just naturally am more creative. So that's where I add my value in being able to do that. When we're able to sit with that, when we're able to have compassion for who we are, that's where then we're able to actually recognize and understand that, okay, this is a reality of me, but this isn't the only reality that exists in this world. And so when we can also get comfortable with the parts about us that we realize like, wow, I didn't realize how much of that influenced me to think in a way that actually is not healthy for me. And so when we can dig into that a little bit more, I think of that as self-compassion. I think of that as a place of like really serving yourself, investing in yourself, that instead of those moments where you get like really, stressed out and you just start scrolling on TikTok instead. Right. And so it's like we create these distractions for ourselves as a form of self-compassion of like, well, I'm just resting. I'm just going to go for a mani-pedi. I took care of myself. I went to the spa. All of those things are wonderful. Absolutely. But if we actually give ourselves to take some time to take care of our nervous system, which is where the root of all of our healing is. If we take some time to do breath work, if we take some time to sit with ourselves, have silence, have time away from everybody, where like you literally have nothing to do on your plate and you're not going to fill it with things and distract yourself, and just get into a season of loving yourself. I think that is one of the most powerful things that anyone can do for self-compassion.
I love that so much. It reminds me of, I feel like as part of my more than several years ago, but not that many more than several years ago, when I was like so ready to fall in love and meet my partner, I was like, you know what? I listened to countless advice podcasts and read all the things and was like, I need to date myself the way that I want to be dated. Like,
Yeah.
what does it look like for me to date myself? Like, I'm not going to wait for someone else to do this. And I started doing it and I had a great time. I still do it.
I love that. I love that. I had a friend who did like Sundays by herself, and she would take herself on a date every Sunday.
Totally. Yeah, I love it. So I'm curious, when you think about for you what that's looked like.
Ooh.
Yeah. You mentioned a few very practical, like tangible things, like sitting alone, turning off the distractions. But what are some of the ways that you practice self compassion?
Yeah. I mean, I think that little things like something that I've been doing actually for the last 6 months, no, longer than that now. I think it's been like 9 months actually, and consistently. Every morning I wake up and the first thing I do, like I have a journal, and on the left side of the journal, just like one page, I will write my affirmations and not like these like lofty affirmations, but generally just kind of like celebrating like, I'm so proud of myself for doing XYZ and connecting it back to a why, because by connecting it back to the why is what builds it as an internal identity. And so, being able to say that like, I'm so proud that I, achieved, like I went to yoga and I now have, I'm feeling healthier. And the reason why this is so important for me is because, I have Hashimoto's, I have multiple autoimmune issues, and this actually helps to relieve some of that. And it allows me to live a much more healthier life. Like, so by connecting it back to that piece gives me my why and gives me my purpose of like, oh yeah, this is why we're doing it, instead of this like empty thing of like, I'm so proud of myself for being this like, healthy person. Okay. So on the left side of the page, every morning I write down like whatever is coming up for me in that moment that I feel like I need some extra love around. And so, if I have a bunch of sales calls, I'll be like, wow, like so proud. I secured 3 sales calls today, and, we secured the deals and we did this. And this matters because through this, we're able to make bigger impact. And like, so I connect it. So I do that in the mornings. And then every evening before I go to bed, pull that same journal out. And at the right page of it, I write all my gratitude. What happened today that really felt nourishing, and not things just simply like the sky was blue, it didn't rain. Like, yes, but then it's like, it didn't rain, the sky was blue, and that helped me go for a walk outside. And I felt so nice to be able to have, a break in my schedule. I was so proud of myself for, instead of filling time with something else, because I had a 2-hour break between calls, I took those 2 hours to go for a walk and sit in the grass or sit at the beach and just, dial down a little bit, give my body a minute to rest. So I'll write gratitude. And I have noticed such a shift in my perspective by doing that, because there's this, idea sometimes where I stumble on this with clients and with friends, even who are like, oh, I didn't have a gratitude today because nothing really happened. I'm like, something happened today. It can be something small. Like I ate I was craving this sushi thing and I ate it and it felt delicious and it, brought me so much joy, right? Like whatever that is, as small as it is or as big as it is from a mindset perspective that you're working on. So that's something that's really been powerful in my day-to-day journey. Again, it's like those micro steps that add on over time. And I think that one of the biggest things that people can do, especially as entrepreneurs, is that we can get really sucked into our work, and it can get really, I definitely can be a workaholic, and I love my work. And that's the thing, is that when people call me workaholic, I'm like, no, but I love it. So to me, this isn't stressful, but I think it's really important to also continue to surround yourself with social communities that have nothing to do with your work. To be able to be around a community that can celebrate you, a community that you can celebrate, and just keeping yourself outside of the digital world and more going to in-person things. I think that the more technology there is, it's moving us away from that. But that's something that I've done, is like I've started to really invest in like, if we're both living in the same city, let's find a lunch to talk instead of just a Zoom call. So I will find ways to do more in-person experiences to just give myself some more compassion around that community piece.
Oh, I love that so much. As you know, I'm such a proponent of community and the impact of community. And I think, especially as life has been feeling more safe lately, I know just so many of us are craving more variety in our days and not just sitting at our laptops on Zoom.
Yeah, totally.
Well, there's so many things I could talk to you about, Payal. Truly, the list is endless, and I am so enjoying our conversation. I also want to be respectful of your time and our listeners' time and bandwidth. And so I'll ask you one more question, and then we'll also ask for info on how people can follow along with you. I'm curious, if you were to give your younger self one piece of advice, what piece of advice would you most want to give your younger self?
Oh, honestly, I'd say do exactly everything you're doing. I'm not going to have my younger self change anything, because then I wouldn't be where I am today. Even just doing that one small change would have maybe not led me to what I'm building today. Even if I had an ounce more of confidence, even if I had an ounce more of self-trust in myself, I may not have then experienced some of the resilience that I needed to build in order to get to the things that I'm really excited about doing today. So I'd actually say go on your path as is, as challenging and troubling and frustrating as it is, because you're going to learn so much from all of it.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for that gift. It's such a gift.
Thank you.
And I'm curious, for people who want to know more about you and what you're up to, what are the best places for them to find you and follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if they want to connect or just learn more about what we're doing with RK Impact and just RK Empathy and all, they can obviously always go to rkempathy.com. Separately, I am probably the most active on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So I'm currently more voyeuristic on TikTok. I just watch things, I don't post. But LinkedIn and Instagram would be the two places that they can totally find me, follow me, DM me. It's me responding on the messages, not nobody else. Otherwise, they can learn more on rkempathy.com.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. Well, I so appreciate you making time. I'm so inspired by what you're building and really just so honored to be in relationship and in community with you, Payal. So thank you so much for making time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and just also for the community that you build and the space that you hold for everyone in your world. You do it so thoughtfully and with so much kindness and love. And, I'm sure that they all feel that and I feel it. And so I'm just so grateful that we connected. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really received that. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you're currently listening to it, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram at liz.best, that's lis.best, and you can find Girls Club Collective at girls_club_collective. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching for Liz Best, that's my name, LISBEST, and Girls Club Collective. Join our mail list by visiting the Girls Club Collective homepage and scrolling down to the bottom. You'll be in the loop on upcoming events, retreats, and opportunities to make magic with us, and you'll also receive a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch.